Welcome to the Principal Podcast, where we talk about how the best professional services firms grow. Whether you're looking to scale your firm or learn from the stories of founders and leaders who've done it, you're in the right place. Join us as we interview the best leaders in professional services. Let's get on with the show.
Today, we have the opportunity to speak to Mr. Dan Phelps. Dan is the CEO of a company called Tntra, where he leads global expansion across North America, Europe, the Middle East, Japan, and Asia. Very busy man. He helps enterprises accelerate innovations through AI, product strategy, intellectual property creation, and organizational transformation. With all that in his travel schedule, I'm curious to see how Dan does it all. So Dan, share with us your journey and how you came about to form Tntra, please.
Thanks, Dennis, and thank you for having me on the show. So I spent 25 plus years mainly as a practitioner. So started off in technology. So I think it may be an unusual journey for what started off as a developer many moons ago to come through to a CEO. But yeah, before I came into Tntra and essentially jumping onto the other side, let's say, I was a practitioner for 25 years and really through technology and strategy and product. And I guess, I'd say technology has always fascinated me, right from, my brothers having every home computer which came out in the 80s and 90s, which I'd kind of learned to code on. And my parents were very good friends with a NASA engineer who taught me Unix and coding and things like that. So, I had a love of technology from a very early age. And I guess, I've seen some fairly important movements over the last few years, from AI back through to cloud and agile and those things.
So when you did all that, obviously from an early age, I mean, you created a passion for kind of getting involved in that, and you continued it all the way now to your career. So when you work with companies and you go in there and analyze what could be done better in a transformation point of view, what are the problems you're looking to solve for them, and why is that important to you, Dan?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, if you look at the range of customers and partners that we deal with today, it's anything from the kind of two people in a garage startup with an idea through to large enterprises. So, the problems are different for both of them, but in some ways there's a red thread going through change, investment, transformation, scaling, right?
Right.
I think the
Correct.
problem, if we look at enterprises, to me, it's a lot of them have become very complex, right? And there's a lot of knowledge silos, a lot of old systems, a lot of data, a lot of technology problems. And why consultancy? I think a lot of technology teams and innovation and PMO teams are just very focused on keeping the lights on. They don't have a lot of breathing space to think about, how do we disrupt ourselves? How do we progress? How do we build more IP on what the company does today? And I think having a consultancy come in who are essentially practitioner-led, we've been there, done that. We can empathize with the kind of the CTOs and the CIOs of the world, or the chief innovation officers, etc. I think putting AI on top of that complexity doesn't really solve anything. And it was the same with cloud, and it was the same with, the agile movement, etc. Right? You can't just put this technology or this methodology on top of something which, that's not how it works, right? So you really need to understand the blueprint. You need to understand the business capabilities. You need to understand the strategy, where the company wants to go, what the company's IP is as well. And this is a interesting thing that I find speaking to many different companies is if you kind of sit down and say, okay, what's your secret sauce? What is the IP that you're building, and what is the IP that you're going to in the future, and how you're managing that? Because, within Tntra and our, whatever it is, 250 years of experience between the leadership teams of leading with IP, we find a lot of companies don't really do that. They don't think IP first before they go build. They kind of have an idea and they try chase it, and then IP comes in after. So we're very much a proponent of focusing on IP first. And I think we do help businesses understand where the real opportunities are. So, simplifying the underlying processes, using technology in the right way, and then using AI to help them build an intelligence layer for their company, which I think is important, because one of the great things about AI, and we all use AI on our daily lives now, whether it's create music or in our day-to-day work, is if you can build the context of your strategy, of your capabilities, of your investments into an AI layer, which is yours and sovereign, then that becomes this brain of the company, which, you know, anybody in the company can use, which I think is an incredibly powerful thing to have.
Well, compared to what we had to do before, it is light years ahead. And so when you do that and you use that technology, you're right, it's how you implement it within your organization. So tell me a bit about who is your ICP, your ideal client profile. You mentioned a two-person garage as well as a bigger enterprise, but in general, where's your sweet spot for customer acquisition?
So I think our best clients tend to be organization where the problem is strategic, or where it's complicated, or where it crosses organizational boundaries or countries as well. So I think, you know, a lot of the practitioners that we have got engineering or large scale transformation backgrounds. So we love complexity and we love a problem and simplifying that. So it might be a CEO who's trying to pivot and change the business. It could be CIOs and CTOs who are dealing with, you know, legacy technology and platforms and they don't know where to start. Or, you know, an entrepreneurial leader within a business who's been given a very ambitious outcome and they're kind of looking and saying, well, I need some help to get here. I need to understand my business. I need to understand the blueprint of what we have. And that situational awareness, I think, so from inside their business and outside in the market. So how do we take that knowledge and then turn that into a transformation plan? And at Tntra, we work, you know, the kind of the full spectrum, right? So from, as I mentioned, you know, founders who have an idea and want to understand how to risk mitigate, how to get investment, how to build the technology for the idea that they have, all the way through to ecosystems and governments and kind of large scale opportunities like that. So it's makes my life very interesting, Dennis. You know, it's the full spectrum.
The good part about that is your job's never boring, as you just stated, and you love it when you wake up and there's potentially a new challenge every day. I know I do in my business, so I understand completely what you're talking about. So let's talk about how people hear about Tntra. So if you're talking about, you get sometimes a CIO, a CTO, a CEO, a C-suite person. Do they reach out to you? Or have you reached out to them? So let's talk about ways you market. First, it could be referrals, which is the most traditional that all businesses use. Had a great reference. I worked with ABC over here. That went great. And they will refer me to XYZ. And that opens the door for you. Then you've got direct marketing, where you might be doing, for example, LinkedIn marketing or some sort of a media campaign where you're trying to get your name in front of people and they see that and that entices them to give you an inquiry. Or conferences, where you go to major conferences, especially with all the global travel you do, you might be involved in some conferences in different geographical areas, different countries. And then finally, thinking about how you might go to market through methodologies like besides meeting, podcasting, things like we're doing right here. Tell me which ones are working the best for you currently, Dan.
So as a CEO, my favorite thing is referrals. Right. So if we have, you know, if we've done great work or are doing great work for a customer and they say, hey, I know this person over here, you should go speak to them. That's the easiest conversation that I can have. Right. And we put a lot of effort into making sure that we, you know, deliver the value that we say up front with the customers that we have. And that just leads to referrals. A lot of it is also just because we've all been practitioners over the years working in various different companies, right? So we have relationships and existing networks, and that's a very important part for us as well. Obviously, kind of content and thought leadership are becoming increasingly important. I think authentic thought leadership as well, not kind of AI produced thought leadership, which you do. If you venture onto LinkedIn a lot, you can spot the difference between the two, I think, which is important.
In a heartbeat,
and I think, you know, speaking at conferences, as you say, and targeted audience. But I think there's an important distinction between kind of generating a lead and creating trust and credibility as well. So, you know, we do cold outreach. but in complex professional services, and the amount that people are investing in the change, and it's, it's their role, it's their job, it's the future of their company. A lot of that's just trust, and that's what they're buying. They're buying trust in a consultancy or a tech firm or whoever it is that they're going to ultimately get the service from. And I think, for me, I think podcasting is an interesting one. I don't think a podcast is some magic lead generation machine, but I think if somebody hears the kind of thing that your company's about, the kind of problems that you're wrestling with and helping customers with, you can kind of build that credibility before you speak to them, right? And I've had a few people who've come to me who've been customers who say, yeah, I saw you at Money 2020 in Amsterdam give a talk on this years ago. And, it's that kind of connection of thought, I think, is an important thing in terms of building trust. And I think ultimately that experience is ultimately selling the expertise and the ability to solve those problems that customers need the help with.
Ironically, in your answer, I counted it, you said trust 4 times. And it is the most critical thing. And when we do our business world today, because you're right, AI generated things on LinkedIn or any other sometimes media pushed out, you can tell more often than not. And that diminishes trust, in my opinion, versus your individuality. And you can speak to people, Dan, and your team can speak to people. You establish that trust. And that's going to be a bellwether separator more often than not, I think, in the years ahead as we look at the value of AI and also the detriment of AI.
Indeed.
Think about for a moment, you got within your customers, you target different layers of people you've got to go to sell, influencers, decision makers, and you mentioned you want to get to that C-suite. So let's say someone saw you at a conference or you did something and they contact you. So from the initial contact to the completion to start an agreement, what's that selling cycle look like?
Mm-hmm. I think it really depends on the customer. If it's one of our incubatees, for example, so we incubate startups and founders and get them through to position for pre-seed or seeding and lay the foundations and the roadmap. And that often is referrals and can be a matter of a couple of weeks to go from first conversation to, hey, let's book you in and get going at this point in time, all the way through to kind of government, which, as you probably aware, can take a very long time and a lot of conversation, through to the spectrum of kind of enterprise where, if they want to move fast on stuff and it's a good connection that we have, we can get signed in days. And we've had some of those recently, all the way up to kind of 3-4 months where, the companies are doing the initial outreach to understand, who are the right people to help them, and they're going through a process themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, you have different stakeholders, obviously, within the organization. So you want to make sure that you know which one ideally you can go to get that final decision. But especially in government, it's not that clean. Sadly, it's more layered, more bureaucratic. Obviously, it's why it's called government.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in the private sector, the private sector seems to be a little bit more expedient and can get you help quicker. And so that may be one thing that you guys look at. So let's talk about retention. So you work with a client, you've done a good job. 2 questions I'd like to have clarity on and would help, I think, the audience. One, how do you measure the success of what you did for that organization? Everyone's into metric analysis, but define what you guys think is a good job, which would keep a client coming back.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, with our various different offerings, right? So we have our kind of advisory arm, we have our platforms that we sell, and we also have our kind of engineering and business operations app pods, as we call them. So pods are effectively a team of AI agents and people. And we very much have the ethos of that we're building this team for you. Right. So it's a product team. They can be working with your product team. They could be a payment operations team who are working with your operations team. And we have quite a unique model where essentially as a company grows and things happen within their environment, they can acqui-hire that team into their own business. So we very much start from day one with the engagement of, we're building this team for you. We have a great methodology for how these people deliver and work alongside your team. And we always look at that as a long-term engagement. Often we have equity in those companies as well. So it does feel like a true partnership. Their success is our success. For the more enterprise customers, fundamentally, like you say, it's about results, right? So if we, a lot of our initial pieces of work will be like a 90-day, what we call our CTO as a service kind of work package. And that is looking at the blueprint, looking at the strategy, understanding the risks within the business and how it's trying to change, and coming up with future architecture and product platforms or data platforms or whatever may fit within the brief of the investment portfolio that they have. And so for me, it's getting that first piece of work right and being able to help them through discussions around the change and how they need to set themselves up for that transformational change. And going back to that word again, I think at that point it builds trust. Because if it's, going through transformation, whether it's my CTO or myself or other people in the leadership, we can talk about the things which have worked well in our history and the things which haven't, and then how we mitigate those risks and how we can help the customer through those risks as well. But I think for us, we're increasingly trying to move away from that kind of traditional model of here's a project with a start and an end. We're looking at how we can share in success in the companies, how we can build, their own people, how we can build this intelligence layer for them as well. So all of those things create a much deeper and sticky relationship than just, here's a project, here's the outcome at the end of that. Thank you very much. Call us when you're busy again or you need some help. It's really for me about building a longer term, deeper relationship where we can share in the success of the company as well.
Well, also because of the fact you guys have lived it in many different experiences, and your team all have the awareness of what really this stuff is going to happen, how it occurs, and you can then share that guidance with your technology and your ability to transform what they're doing. It would lead to more sustainable customers. So I like your strategy because that's going to avoid transactional business. It's more relationship oriented. And that's the best way, I think, to build your business based on that premise. So looking at what you guys see in the future, let's call it the balance of this year heading into next year, because with technology, that stuff could change everything, but who knows what it'll be like in 2028. And 2027 is going to be probably different. But right now we're in a somewhat we can capture what's happening a little bit mentality. Where do you see the biggest challenges in your business growth at Tntra?
Mhm. I think, Dennis, the one thing I'm incredibly proud of a CEO of the company that I'm operating for. The biggest challenge is going to be the scaling that we're seeing without losing what made the business successful in the first place, right? So we purposely have a headquarters in Gujarat in India in a city called Vadodara, right? Which is it's not a typical tech city. It's a creative, artistic, industrial town where we really wanted to create something different with the people out there. So really, not the kind of people who take a spec, deliver a spec, and work to a sheet. Let's say it's people who think IP, who think value creation, who are creative types, who are coming into technology. And I think that's really important for the DNA of our business, and scaling that especially as we like to grow our own people as well. I don't want to have this, let's go hire a load of people in to scale the business as quickly as possible. So kind of first principles for me is how do we keep that DNA going as we scale, and we are scaling at the moment quite aggressively. I think it's relatively easy to grow by throwing more people at things. It's much harder to grow while maintaining that quality, that spirit of the entrepreneur in the people that we're growing, and that kind of accountability as well. And I think as you get bigger, everything has to become more repeatable as well, right? So sales, delivery, talent, technology, IP. We put a lot of focus using AI as well about how we take the bureaucracy out of these things and let people focus a lot more on the art rather than the science, let's say.
Well, it's interesting. I love the fact you located a place that was more along what you guys wanted for a place to have for the headquarters, not a traditional area in India. You went somewhere off the grid, found this area you like, and more importantly, what you're describing in my terminology is you'll want a culture, and your culture for Tntra is specific. You have a design for how you want it. You want to stay within that. You don't want to damage the culture. You want to cultivate that unique culture you're trying to establish. And that's not always easy to do. So I applaud you for that and that goal and that vision. And so therefore, when you look at establishing that culture, scaling it as you're talking about more aggressively now, where do you see the biggest opportunities as you scale your business?
Um, well, I would say probably one thing to add on to the end of my previous answer on that as well is when I bring even interns into the business, I'm looking at them now and thinking, are you the next CTO or CPO? Right? Have you got the capability to kind of get there? Because, as we know, especially with the changing landscape in technology, and the way teams are composed and the way things are done, fundamentally, I need people who can think in a multidimensional way, right? Not just people who are good engineers, or not just good people who are good product people or good designers or good business analysts. It's really pushing people to be kind of jack of all trades within a pod or within a team. And I think that's very interesting, because you get a lot of people who are coming from a pure tech background, or people are coming from a pure functional background, and it's building that next generation of technology, product design talent who think that way, really, who are happy to go outside the box of what a traditional role would be. I think really, fundamentally with our customers, that's starting to resonate as well. And I think we're kind of betting on that kind of team structure in the future with customers, obviously augmented and supported with AI, as really where things are going and where the challenges are going to be. Because fundamentally, there's a lot of the enterprise world out there who are still operating in the old way, don't really know how to get to the new way, and is seeing, let's say, AI native companies pop up. And we had a great conversation with a SaaS company a couple of weeks ago, and they're a year into it. They're almost EBITDA positive after being a year in business, which is fantastic. And they've got 4 people. Right? And if you think a SaaS business maybe 5 years ago, they'd be at this stage where they'd be wanting a huge amount more investment and funding. They'd maybe have 50 to 100 people on the books or whatever. Yeah. These people have started with agentic first, right? And so they're enabling much less investment to come into them for much faster validation of what they're doing and much faster returns. And I think that was an interesting microcosm of really what's going to happen at the macro over the next few years.
So when you look at that and you've got that opportunity to speak with those people and other companies, you guys have really got to be, like you said, open to all types of ideas to how to approach a business problem. So your experience is invaluable, but utilizing AI as technology as a tool and utilizing it to have your people be a jack of all trades, like you said, will allow them to diversify and come up with solutions faster if they're versed in all the different aspects of the job and utilize AI. So you're trying to make your team, for lack of a better term, if you look at your ability, and if we looked at the sport of football, as you call it, soccer, we call it, I mean, you got to have a lot of people that can be not only a defender, a mid player, a goalie. You got to have a little bit of everything, and that's what you want in one person. So it's pretty comprehensive what you're trying to establish, and I like that approach. So, Dan, our time just blew by, and there's our 30 minutes is up, but I wanted to let you know I really enjoyed every bit of this dialogue. I hope you have as well. I think you shared with the audience
Thank you.
a lot of good things about your company, but I now want to give you a forum to tell everyone how can they best reach Tntra, what's the best method to get in contact with you guys, and what would be the way for them to make sure they have an audience with you or your team.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, thank you, Dennis. Really enjoyed the chat. The easiest route is to go through to sales@tntra.io. So that's our kind of sales email. You can join me on LinkedIn and send me a message. I'm fairly responsive on there as well. And obviously, I do get around a bit, and so do my team in the various locations that we operate. So more than happy to travel to go meet people and discuss their opportunities as well, and help solve their problems.
Well, on LinkedIn, do you post if you're traveling to a geographical area so people are aware you're coming into that area?
Yeah, indeed. Usually my team do first. So yeah, for sure. I have a very hot marketing team.
There you go. That's what it's all about. All right, Dan, really enjoyed it. And thank you for sharing all your insights today on Principal Podcast. I think the audience will now have a better idea of what you do. And I like your business model, the way you're doing it, making your people very comprehensively skilled, so they can actually come in and really get into solving problems quicker because of that diversity. Dan, thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Dennis. Much appreciated.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Principal Podcast. We hope you've learned valuable lessons and strategies to grow your firm and take your business to the next level. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you're listening to this show so you never miss an episode. To apply and be a guest on the show, click the link in the description. See you next time.